G'day and welcome to Lunch Money. Lunch Money is the online and social media home for workouts, special situations and capital raising professionals. My name is Nick Samios. I'm the Director and Fund Manager here at Hermes Capital. So a very warm welcome to you. Today we're going to be talking about exactly what happens on the 31st of December when it comes to the end of the insolvent trading moratoriums and the other measures that are coming off at that time, because there is a lot of confusion about that as I go about the place talking to insolvency practitioners and insolvency lawyers. They're certainly at odds about that. Before I get to that, this week the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor, Guy Debelle, announced that Australia is technically out of recession, that the non-Victorian states had dragged the stats up. Obviously, Victoria had been dragging it down with the lockdown there, but overall that we're technically out of recession. At the same time, the Reserve Bank's predicting that 5,200 businesses will fail. In September, voluntary administrations were up 11%, although that was off a very low base. And a lot of insolvency people that I speak to sort of hardly felt that. There's predictions of bank losses, of course. So whilst we're saying that we're technically out of recession, we haven't hit the wall yet. We've got to see what happens when the moratoriums come off, when JobKeeper comes off, how bank losses are going to affect things. There was a couple of credit agencies that were credit and collection agencies that were giving statistics. I think it was Collections House said that business defaults were up 23% in the month of September. We've still got 930,000 people unemployed, and even that number might be masked by the government measures. One of the comments that Guy Debelle made when he made the comments about when he announced that the economy was technically out of recession, he did say that the difficulties in forecasting were the worst ever. So it's the worst time ever to try and make an accurate forecast. And we know how those forecasts normally go. And that, of course, is because of the great uncertainty. Like I say, we ran a poll actually this week in preparation for this show to ask people about what the moratorium's coming off. Man, we'll come to that in a little bit. Before I get to that, just a reminder to share, like or subscribe our humble podcast to help us get the message out. And I would also like to remind you that you can ask a question online, and the best question gets this glorious exclusive and limited edition Lunch Money mug. So if you ask the best question whilst we're live, the Lunch Money mug goes to you. We've got two special guests today, Warren Jar and Jeanette Muller, and I can see you, Warren. Warren's joined us. We'll come to you in a moment, Warren, but firstly I'll start with Jeanette Muller. G'day, Jeanette. How are you?
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming back. Jeanette Muller is the partner at Hall Chadwick in Brisbane. I don't think she was personally responsible for the borders staying closed to Sydney. I mean, we feel very discriminated against. You're letting Newcastle people and other people from other parts of New South Wales, but us good folk from Sydney are still ostracised. But tell me, what is it, before we get into our main topics, what is it that keeps you busy of late?
Yeah, sure. And look, I'm sorry that we're keeping you out, and I'm not sure that you're going to get the result you want this weekend either. So let's wait and see. But there's been some early leaks which might suggest otherwise. So yeah, Nick, thanks very much. I look after Safe Harbour here at Hall Chadwick. I suppose you'd say I'm a bit like special projects. I wear a few hats. I look after practice management up here in Brisbane, and as I say, keep an eye on Safe Harbour throughout the country. What's been keeping me this busy is certainly keeping track and making sure my Safe Harbours are compliant. Really just getting everything organised, looking throughout the country, making sure that, if there is an increase in numbers, that we're well equipped to be able to cope with that. Also this week, I've sort of looked at a couple of really interesting webinars, very similar to your own. I saw earlier in the week, Thea from ASIC gave a presentation to AIIP. I thought that was very interesting, and also the IPA was talking about some Queensland-specific changes to the building industry fairness scheme up here, which is really going to be a game changer for the subcontractors up here in Queensland. So,
can you quickly tell us about that, just in a nutshell? What are those?
Yeah.
Because I'm very interested in the construction sector. What?
Okay, so it's going to be a system where there's going to be a deeming of charges, essentially, which are going to be able to be registered through the PPSR. So effectively, if you're a subcontractor, the contractor goes into some form of liquidation, and you've already gone through arbitration and you've got your debt set, you can then go to the principal. So you can automatically get a charge, so you can skip over the liquidated company. So that came in early October. We're still coming up to speed with exactly what that means and how the subbies go about getting their debts, set. But it does seem to be a real game changer, because it's going to impact upon developers in terms of their related parties and other entities which subcontractors can now charge on. So it might be a topic for you in the future, Nick.
Yeah, I don't want to get sort of too bogged down in that at the moment, but just so that I know that in the normal course of business, the subby could sort of skip over. So this is basically allowing that in the event of a formal insolvency, by the sounds of things.
Sure. In a more simplified version, you're talking about like a subby's charge, for example, under the cipher. This is slightly different. This is a different regime again.
Okay. All right. Well, look, we won't get too bogged down in that right now. I certainly think that you hit a home run by specialising in safe harbour, because I know that you did that obviously well before COVID came along. And now, when the government basically put all of Australia into safe harbour, certainly everybody who wasn't aware that there was a thing called safe harbour became aware of it. And I think once we get into 2021, it's going to become very interesting. Okay. I will park you for a moment, Jeanette, and we'll just introduce Warren Jaya. G'day, Warren. How are you?
Hey, Nick. Doing well. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for coming along today. Warren's a partner at HWL Ebsworth Lawyers, also in Brisbane. And what is it that's been keeping you busy the last little while?
Well, it certainly hasn't been much insolvency, Nick. I think we've noticed a rapid decline in inquiries in anything of any substance, certainly over the COVID period. But what I've been seeing more and more is partnership and business internal disputes. So I have a basic theory that there are 3 times that businesses start having internal disputes. It's when they start making money, stop making money, or when one of the partners or proprietors' family lives change. And we've certainly seen at least one of the first 2 coming up very prevalent at the moment. So we're seeing like commercial property partnerships and the like, where people have been together for many years, separating their interests. And that seems to be the biggest focus in our group and quite a few people around us at the moment.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be, the lawyers that we speak to, there's a lot of that. I guess the thing about this COVID thing has put a lot of pressure on relationships, both personal and business. So that sort of seems to be a theme.
Especially when people have been together for 20 years and stuff. And it's quite, I'm seeing those sort of relationships break down now.
Yeah. Business relationships or personal?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, there's a saying in a marriage, isn't there? When the money goes, the love goes. And I suppose, I also... I had a colleague who used to say that people in business are as honest as they are profitable. So I guess, when the love goes and when the honesty goes, in the circumstances that we're in. And aside from that...
You go, sorry.
Say again.
I was going to say, sometimes when the money arrives, the love goes even quicker.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, indeed. That is interesting. And what else are you seeing? So a bit of the sort of partnership issues?
You're not really seeing, obviously, the people like the ATO have held off. That being said, the ATO statistics yesterday were there's been an increase in, obviously, the ATO debts, but also an increase in fresh customers, as they call them, as in the increase in number of people not paying their tax. So I think, as would be anticipated, people, as you were speaking earlier, are paying down their debt. They seem to be paying down some of their debt, not all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Do you have much to do with the ATO?
We do some for them, yes.
I got told through the week that the ATO was now doing arrangements over 4 years. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that. I wish they would for my bats and other stuff though.
Yeah. I mean, look, 4 years to me, it's like, my God, that's a slog. But yeah, okay.
You'll start to see them in mortgages and stuff soon, so that'll be one of their focuses. I expect moving forward of taking real property mortgages, which is a focus.
Well, they have sort of flagged that for the last couple of years. So you think that the ATO will start taking property mortgages as security for arrangements? Yeah,
I think they will.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see how that's going to work in practice, because, businesses are going to be looking to raise capital, and of course properties are, they try and borrow against a property to get fresh money, and giving it up as security for old debt is going to be a challenge. But look, all right, Warren, look, we will bring Jeanette back. And if Suba could show the survey that we ran this week. So what we asked was, there is no retrospective protection for directors for the COVID-19 temporary period if their company enters administration after 31/12/20. So basically, the government put the entire economy into safe harbour back in March this year, by which if you were COVID was relief against insolvent trading. I mean, do you just want to? I've given the very sort of the financier's version of that. Warren, do you want to give sort of a little bit more of a nuanced definition of what that was?
I actually think your definition was pretty darn good, Nick.
Okay. All right.
To me, like Jeanette and I are actually in two different mindsets on this. I don't think you need to be in external control by 31 December. On my reading of the Act, and Jeanette does.
All right. Well, just to define the problem. Okay. So the insolvency moratorium ends on the 31st of December, and that being insolvent trading, which is obviously an action against the directors of a company if the company is deemed to be trading whilst it's insolvent. In other words, if the directors are incurring debts, they're ordering materials, ordering services, and that they know they can't pay for those services, or if they suspect they may not be able to pay for those services. COVID is a defence at the moment up until the 31st of December. But after the 31st of December, the question is, if you're not in administration by the 31st of December, do you lose that defence? So, Warren, your view is that, well, we'll go to Jeanette. Okay, so Jeanette, you say yes.
Look, I might just define so you've got two types of safe harbour at the moment. You've got COVID safe harbour, which kicked in on the 25th of March and is supposed to conclude on the 31st of December. It was to go to September, then we got a bit of an extension. Now, we've always had real safe harbour, which is under 588 GA, and then what the coronavirus economics response omnibus bill did was it enabled us to have this COVID safe harbour. Now, the problem with COVID safe harbour, or the issue that we're discussing at the moment, is what is the period that applies? And they use words like it will apply for the period during which commences on the 25th of March, and it's for people in our industry, it's when does that period conclude? Now, if you're in Warren's camp, and perhaps in the TMA camp, you would say that concludes sometime in the future. If you're in my camp, you would say, well, that concludes, according to the legislation, when you enter into some form of external administration. And that's kind of the argument at the moment. Would you agree with that, Warren?
Yes, Jeanette. Well, my theory is that the Act carves out a period of protection. So a company could have been insolvent, I'll say from 1st of January this year, up until it's put into administration on the 1st of March in 2020. COVID safe harbour would give a defence from, in my view, from the 25th of March 2020 to 31 December, but for the period 1 January 2020 to 25 March, and then from 1 January to when it's put into administration or liquidation, those periods are exposed.
You're talking about 2020. What about 2021?
Sorry, 2021, sorry. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So the problem I see is that 2021 is not. what day in 2021? Why not say 2022? You know, there's no actual end date under that section. The section says when you place it into external administration. And I noticed in the exposure draft for the new legislation, they've also added in, or when you place the company into this new form of VA, we'll call it VA Light, whatever it's referred to, which is interesting, because I note that in the that little brochure that they all sent out, that one, I'm sure everyone's seen that, they're talking about a regime where if there aren't enough practitioners, small business practitioners, to be able to go and grab someone to go into this new form of VA Light, that you can just register or show an intention that you want to utilise this regime, so that you can extend the period within which you can place your company into some form of external administration, so that you continue to maintain the benefit of the COVID safe harbour. So that's the way I read it, but, you know, we won't really know until the regulations are released.
Yeah, I mean, you're opening up cans of worms by the dozens there, Jeanette. I mean, the first thing that you mentioned is, are there going to be enough liquidators? Now, most liquidators I speak to get most indignant at the thought that there won't be enough liquidators. They're saying, listen, leave us alone. There'll be plenty of liquidators, you know, and as you know, because they're looking, you know, liquidators are scratching around looking for work at the moment. The other thing that you said, you said something else which just escaped me now, but I was going to liken this safe harbour thing. It's a little bit like the government saying it's legal to drive without your seatbelt until the 31st, right? So you'll get away without a seatbelt because we understand that things are. But my query is this: so let's say I've got a business that I buy and sell goods, so I need to order in the goods. Now, if on the 31st of December I fill my warehouse with goods that I, you know, in all good conscience, I probably can't pay for, you know, is that insolvent trading?
Warren?
You give us a bit hesitant to answer that. There are going to be obviously exclusions to these type of defences, and one of the exclusions was highlighted by Scott Morrison when he talked about these relief coming out, and that was for debts that are incurred with fraud or dishonesty. So if you get a situation where someone knows they can't pay their debts and says, oh, well, I might rack up $1 million worth of debt buying assets that I know I can't pay for, you might have a problem if that's being done in the days before 31 December.
Yeah, I mean, good luck trying to prove that, I guess, in many cases. I think the reason that the TMA wants to say that there's no hard border, if you like, on the 31st of December is because obviously the TMA has a bias for saving companies, and the TMA also has, I guess, a bias for saving companies outside of formal restructuring, because obviously the restructuring process in itself, no matter how good it is, I mean, it's always going to result in some destruction of value. It's just a matter of how much value is destroyed. So I think that obviously they're biasing they're biasing not having to have a formal restructure. So I mean, there is a bit of moral hazard there, I think. What do you think in terms of the sort of the greater good argument, Jeanette?
Yeah, well, look, the first thing I'd say is I don't understand why the TMA would be against it, because at the end of the day, surely all it says is go and get some advice. Don't assume that you're going to be covered, and if in doubt, seek out those who can tell you what the real state of affairs are. And in that regard, why not get real safe harbour? I mean, it still doesn't mean that you're actually going to go into any form of external administration. It just means that you're covering all your bases, and better to be safe than sorry. I mean, after all, safe harbour is just for the directors. It's to give them that added protection from the corporate veil being pierced. So I think that, really the organisations need to have a look at the legislation, apply some statutory interpretation, get to the bottom of it, and start informing appropriately the public who need to understand this legislation. To me, it's pretty straightforward. I think, as I said before, those companies with less than $1 million in creditors will have an extension to the end of 31 March 2021. Those that don't, well, you're big enough to go and get some proper advice. No one's going to have sympathy for you if you get this wrong. Go and get some proper advice.
That's interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things. Firstly, yeah, I mean, I guess the intention of safe harbour is so that directors can have a red hot go at saving the business with good, in good faith, as Trevor Pogrowski has just made a comment there, said, it's all about, you want to have a good faith attempt to save the business without necessarily, risking, every asset that you own through some sort of insolvent trading claim. So that's the intention of Safe Harbour. But one of the questions that I've got, and I'll direct it to you, Warren, is that I'm sort of the view that small businesses, particularly when you get to the even smaller sub $1 million dead end, they're all in. Those small business people, usually they've hocked their home, whether insolvent trading or no insolvent trading, they're all in. Whereas with some of the bigger businesses, when you get to the sort of the M part of the SME, those businesses often have professional directors who are maybe only earning 40, 50, 60 grand as a professional directorship. They don't necessarily have shares in the business, or if they do, it's token. And it's those guys, that don't want to get cleaned up through some sort of insolvent trading action. Do you think that this is where the pressure is going to be?
I think there's going to be pressure across the board because where cash is going to be king come 2021, in my view. So I think your directors of your more mid to larger SMEs are certainly going to be, particularly those, as you properly identify, who don't have all their assets in. If you've got a small two-person company, which is where the people are personally guaranteeing everything, their mortgage is cross-secured, Safe Harbour's useless. Let's be blunt. However, when you move to a larger entity where the people have assets at risk, Safe Harbour provides the right absolute path forward. Now, I should say one thing. Jeanette and I are actually been madly in agreement that Safe Harbour is the right approach for anything of any substance, because relying on the light Safe Harbour, for want of a better description of the COVID amendments, is not the safest way forward. I think Safe Harbour, to be a safe harbour, go get proper professional and independent advice, because it gives you the only path forward that you can hold up independently and say, look, I'm protected.
Well, I think that, regardless, I should quantify my own view on this, regardless of whether or not the director's being all in. The fact is, a Safe Harbour process is still, it still requires the directors to own, to face, look, we do have a problem. And that's one of the biggest issues you have in getting early intervention. So it does encourage the directors to admit they've got a problem in the first place. And secondly, it's a prerequisite of Safe Harbour to have a plan. So regardless of what the consequences might be down the track, just by those two steps alone, facing the problem and having a plan could in fact, preserve stakeholder value across the board anyway. Jeanette, I'm sure you would agree.
Look, absolutely. And I always say that. I mean, it has its own rewards, whether it's the improved corporate governance that comes from actually putting in place a plan, having your regular meetings, reporting back to someone, telling them what you're doing, having me involved, for example, at board meetings with different stakeholders. I just think that, it makes you a better business in any event. The people, arguments in the past as to why companies can't enter into Safe Harbour have been, we can't get our tax in order. We haven't lodged our BAS or our employee entitlements are outstanding. Well, I suspect that most people have lodged their tax now. It was the prerequisite to getting the taxpayer cash boosts and all the rest of it, to get JobKeeper and everything. Australia's probably more compliant than it's ever been in terms of GST returns and BASs, etc. So, short of putting together a turnaround plan, as you said, what's stopping people from really getting, even if it's a light Safe Harbour light option, from getting some proper advice? I'd encourage them to do it.
All right. Well, look, I'd like to take a walk through some of our headlines, but before I do, so Jeanette, you are of the view, come before the 31st of December, if you think you're going to have problems moving forward, either enter VA or enter Safe Harbour proper, or enter, what is it that you need to do?
Well, it depends. It depends on your circumstances, I suppose. Depends if you can identify whether you were insolvent. Have you got an insolvent trading claim? If you don't place your company into an external administration come the 31st of December, you might want to enter into voluntary administration. If you've got a good success story for the future, you might just be comfortable with Safe Harbour. I mean, obviously, the sooner you get into real Safe Harbour, the sooner that liability stops ticking up. If you enter today, well, I'm not liable for safe harbour from today forward if I go into liquidation or voluntary administration in the future. So it really depends. There's not one size fits all, really. You'd have to have a look at the company and the people involved.
Okay, Warren. So Warren, you are of the view that you don't have to put your company into voluntary administration. Are you saying that because you can put them into safe harbour, or you don't need to do either?
I don't think you need to do either, according to the legislation. But if you're at risk, come 1 January, if you continue to trade without having, while incurring the debts, you're then re-exposed anyway. So my view is on the section that on its strict reading, it doesn't need it. You don't need to have the appointment before 31 December, no. Yeah.
And I should say that Warren saying that he's talking himself out of an early Christmas. So I take it that's...
Can I just change my view there, Nick?
All right, listen, we'll just might have a look at some of the headlines that have been come through the week. And obviously I spoke earlier about the recession issue, but there's one here from the ABC. Coronavirus relief helps Tasmanians pay down debt. Personal insolvency is lowest in 30 years. Jeanette, now that's obviously a headline from Tasmania, but in my experience, that's across the board. Are you seeing people are using their JobKeeper money to pay off debt?
Look, definitely, JobKeeper money is been a godsend to a number of businesses. Insolvency statistics, as we all know, are significantly down. There's no, combined with, of course, the holidays from the banks and other financiers, and landlord relief, etc. I think people are very comfortable at the moment. They're not forced to make any decisions. We've also had some significant relief from the tax office. I think that's the way that the government wants the economy to be at the moment. I think they are encouraging all levels of business to take it easy till the new year, and then slowly allow people to emerge. I mean, if I read some of the literature behind the support for small business, it's like there's going to be a problem. This is the way I interpret it. There's going to be a problem here. Let's take it cautiously and slowly and give people every opportunity to emerge from this hibernation period. So, yes, to answer your question, yes, it's low. Are some of these companies just going to deregister and disappear, as I'm hearing it's happening in Melbourne? I don't know is the answer. Will they use some sort of formal process or just disappear? Who knows?
I don't know if you've seen the movie Awakenings with Robin Williams, but it's basically, I think Robin Williams is a psychiatric doctor of some description, and you've got all of these patients that are catatonic. They're sort of like in this catatonic state. It's not exactly, it's like a walking coma, I suppose. And then he puts them on L-DOPA. And so they've been catatonic and in this sort of walking coma for years and years. And the L-DOPA, all of a sudden, they sort of go back to normal. But then the L-DOPA wears off. And I just wonder whether or not, I just wonder if this thing of us technically being out of recession, we've just had an L-DOPA hit. A dopamine hit of these JobKeeper, etc. Look, our next headline, I'll come to you for this one, Warren, is we've got another article here from the Australian, James Kirby piece in the Australian, spike in late payments of bills show economy in stress. Now, his source data for that particular article, as I said to you before, I had Collections House with a 23% increase. He had another source, Ilium, I think it was, with a 22% increase. What I'm wondering here is, obviously, Warren, we're in this phase where you can't issue, well, you can issue statutory demands, but there's a delayed period. When does that change? And what are you getting people lining up outside your door getting the stat demands ready?
Well, we haven't been, because I think everyone's, obviously those extensions end up towards the end of the year. We're seeing, however, that 6-month period on the stat demand has been obviously disincentive for everyone chasing the debts. But we haven't seen a real willingness for people to sue even over the debts. I think people have been taking the view that in COVID times, what everyone says is, COVID's stopping me paying my bills. Of course, the unscrupulous amongst the debtors say, COVID stopped me paying my bills. And I had a matter recently, and I had to say to them, yeah, you haven't paid your rent since August last year. So COVID didn't kick in for 7 months post that. So the unscrupulous use the GFC, use the Brisbane floods, and they're going to use COVID. The genuine creditors these days, we're seeing are trying to work with their suppliers or their customers more to get the debts paid. I haven't seen a willingness to go into more formal approaches for a little while.
Well, that's interesting. So in many examples, you're saying it's just another example of the dog ate my homework.
Yes.
I just wonder, Jeanette. So Warren just mentioned this thing of he's seeing more informal arrangements, but of course these informal arrangements are the things that the liquidator in 3 months' time loves to get hold of, and they see the round payments. Round payments are obviously an indication that he knew the company was insolvent. So are informal arrangements a good idea?
Not if the company, not if the debtor ultimately ends up in liquidation. Clearly not, because they're all preferential payments. COVID safe harbour is not going to protect anybody, no matter who's right or wrong, and when it expires, from that little sting in the tail. So everyone should be aware of that. But I think it's absolutely right. I suspect that suppliers are taking a lot of charges. They're getting their PPSRs in place. They're getting their credit applications worked out. You're getting equitable mortgages. They're doing everything that they need to, and there's just going to be a change after those proposals were released for the small business changes. I suppose there's this knowledge now that you deal with small business at your own risk. You make sure you cover your bases, because the corporate veil might not be that easy to pierce, and it might be, there's going to be no recoveries for insolvent trading. There might be no recoveries for preferential payments in the future. So get your paperwork right in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, look, it just goes to underscore that we've got this great uncertainty. Look, there was another article that caught my eye this week that I really enjoyed reading, and I recommend it to everybody. It was in the Financial Review, and it was by the economist Warren Hogan. Why the price of cheap money will always be too high. And I guess he was inspired to write this article because, there's talk of, the Reserve Bank just continuing to reduce interest rates and just so that they're flooding the zone with cheap money to try and keep the stimulus happening. And he refers to a more extensive article on this, but there's a couple. If we just put that on the screen again, there's a couple of points that he makes, and I just wanted to quickly work through those by way of closing out, I suppose. Firstly, he talks about cheap money causing financial instability, and what he means by that is it causes artificial inflation of asset prices. So, I mean, do you see that as a problem, Jeanette? Or I suppose high asset prices are good for recoveries and restructuring?
Oh, look, certainly. And if I can speak for the Brisbane market, at least, we don't seem to be having any problems in our residential prices. I have heard that there are some, inner city leasing issues that we might start to see because there's going to be some fundamental cultural changes that'll take place in our business communities throughout Australia, I'm sure. Even for a city like Brisbane, that's pretty much business as usual, other than the fact that we don't let Southerners in at the moment. A lot of people still work from home. I've heard a lot of different state capitals don't have as many people around at the lunchtime crowd. So there is, and yet our suburbs are sort of thriving with the new lunchtime crowds and the different opportunities that are happening there. So I think in different regions there'll be different problems in different markets, to put it straight.
Okay. All right. Look, we've just been thrown a curveball here. Trevor Probrosky is going for gold. He's going for the lunch money mug. And he's asked quite a lengthy question here, so I'll read it out. I won't put it on the screen. Does Jeanette or Warren have any details of companies that have actually entered into COVID safe harbour, and what success result has it brought? I'm of the view that there may be a handful of larger listed and SME companies that have entered safe harbour, but certainly not significant numbers. From bankers I have spoken to, there are very few clients that have gone through safe harbour. Any views?
Well, I'll tackle that first. So with respect to COVID safe harbour, the catch-22 on this one is that any companies that have gone into liquidation now during, let's call it the COVID period, well, they are the ones that will be utilising the COVID safe harbour. So anyway, if a company went into liquidation today, if I'm the liquidator assessing your insolvent trading, I would say, well, you're not going to be liable for insolvent trading from the period today back to the 25th of March. I'll have a look pre-25 March and I'll assess if you've got a liability for that period. So I'd say there'll be quite a lot being utilised at the moment, but that's subject to the fact that liquidations are well down on numbers during this period. Where the sting is going to come is next year when we finally resolve this issue between Warren and I as to whether or not companies that go into liquidation next year will be putting their hand up saying, hey, you can't sue me for insolvent trading for last year. And, you know, we'll have to know the answer by next year, because liquidators are going to have to pursue people for insolvent trading during this period, which would seem to be pretty easy given that, you know, it's been pretty difficult times. Or alternatively, you would just say, well, there is no safe harbour to pursue. So is it being utilised? In answer to that question, well, it has to be being utilised, because I've certainly seen reports that are being issued that are saying that there's no answer. There's no need to pursue directors for insolvent trading during this period. So yes, it is being utilised.
Okay. I mean, look, I wonder if the thrust of Trevor's question there is that it's not being talked about enough, you know, the safe harbour going forward. So I do wonder about that. Look, we are beginning to run down the clock. I do want to just get back to my news article there. If we can just pop that back. Now we've got this, there's another point that's made with it. When there's a lot of cheap money, firstly, the asset prices get pushed up. Secondly, you push financing activity outside the core regulated financial system. So what he's saying there is that a lot of money goes out of the banking system and into, you know, the what do they call it? The dark shadow banking and all that sort of stuff. And I guess, you know, us as a fund, you know, people might say that applies to us. We've been doing this for 10 years. At Hermes, but I must say there are new players, and I do wonder if they know what they're doing. Some of them, and it does worry me. There's a lot of money chasing yield, but I don't want to dwell on that. The third point is about economic efficiency. So he says that when you've got a lot of cheap money around, you have an issue with economic efficiency. And he says that what this means is the cheap money allows weaker firms to survive for too long. Now, I wonder, you know, we've been talking about safe harbour and restructuring, etc. You know, do you think that there, you know, even maybe before COVID, there was cheap money? Are there businesses that really, you know, should have closed the doors or restructured and they've been kept afloat by cheap money? Warren?
Absolutely. We all hear those terms, zombie companies that have been bandied about for a while. When with JobKeeper and other support, they've been able to maintain a trade when they otherwise wouldn't. We've also had matters that have been supporting companies in not paying their bills, not only the COVID relief that we were talking about. The ATO has been relatively quiet in their pursuits. Landlords have been forced to not allow, to reduce their rent and work with their tenants. So yes, there are a lot of companies I think that are trading at the moment that come some period after 1 January won't be trading anymore. The economic issue that obviously that's associated with that is all of the companies that are out there that are fulfilling their obligations, paying their rent, paying their tax, are being penalised to a degree by the reluctance to pursue those who aren't. And I think 2021 will be the year when that comes to fruition.
Yeah, look, I certainly think there's a lot of moral hazard. And as I said on this show once before, you know, we all know from the zombie movies that zombies love to eat the flesh of the living. And, you know, so there is a risk of contagion there. Look, we are going to wrap up because we're actually out of time. I know, Jeanette, I notice Nick Combis has made a comment there with respect to the new regime. And I know, Jeanette, that you and I were talking earlier this week about... We might just quickly touch on this if we can. We were talking about pre-insolvency, and you know, in the UK, this regime that they've brought into Australia now, in the UK, that is used as a way of registered liquidators, or you know, the people that do the voluntary administrations to also get involved in pre-administration. So, what are your thoughts on that, just briefly?
So in the new regime, the way I see it is that you are still going to need some people to assist with holding the director's hand and taking them through the process before they get introduced to a small business practitioner. Now, I think that the small business practitioner will be the person who'll approach all the creditors, put out the proposal, and be quite light in terms of what they're going to actually help the director achieve. It'll be almost an automated process. So I don't see why there wouldn't be two small business practitioners involved in the process. One to help at the front, to almost package up the proposal and assist the director and guide them into whatever it is that they seek to achieve. And then the second is to hand it over to a more formal process, because you won't have very much time we haven't seen the regulations yet, but I'm imagining that it's going to be a very quick, fast process. And so you will need to have spent some time before with this company to have organised all that. So I think it is a sort of a form of pre-packing in a sense.
Yeah, I must admit, I probably would have liked to have done a little bit more research on it. In the UK, does the administrator, before they're formally appointed, the ones that are doing the pre-packing, is that the same person that's doing the formal administration, or as you just said, are they two different people? What are your thoughts on this, Warren? I mean, do you think there's an opportunity here for maybe there to be some changes to the way insolvency, pre-insolvency is handled?
There is. Obviously the pre-insolvency market has proponents and those who are critical of it. For those who are following through in the genuine, let's help this business reconstitute properly, these new reforms will provide a good methodology going forward. However, by paring back the investigations and the analysis, I'm wondering whether there'll be a reduction in analysis of corporate governance and corporate activity, so that activities that would otherwise attract a bit of scrutiny may well slip through the keeper with this new regime. And you start to wonder what's the cost of that to the economy and generally to business.
Okay. All right. Well, look, we are out of time. I think that we could probably do a whole other episode just on that subject alone. We've covered some pretty technical stuff. Sometimes we get a little bit technical here on Lunch Money, but I have to say a big thank you to Jeanette Muller from Hall Chadwick in Brisbane, and from Warren Jar from HW Ebsworth. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Nick. Pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much for everybody watching us in replay or listening to us on the podcast, and we look forward to speaking with you all again soon. Cheers.
Nick, important question before you go: who won the cup?
Oh, the cup went to Trevor Pogrovsky because he asked a question. Now Nick Combis did make a comment, but he didn't ask a question. So look, Trevor Pogrovsky, congratulations! A shiny special cup is on its way. Thank you very much, guys. We'll catch you soon. Take it easy. Cheers.